Hello, YouTube. This is Attorney Colin Wynn reaching out to you about another topic that I think is very important for the public to understand. The breakdown of our legal system. It's very fundamental. I think there's really two major categories that you put most legal matters in. One is civil. Two, it's criminal. First part, dealing with civil. Civil is oftentimes a lawsuit between parties, an individual suing a company suing another company. That's usually what a civil lawsuit consists of, and the remedy, which is what the goal of getting out of it, is oftentimes monetary, like money. Sometimes it's actually strict performance, which means like, hey, we had a contract to do something, you stop doing it, finish the contract, and we're done. That's strict performance. Another one is an injunction. It's another remedy that's offered in civil law. And injunctions, like, you cannot do this. Like, let's say you were going to destroy this huge church and there's a lawsuit against you to prevent you to enjoin, or otherwise known as get an injunction against you to perform the whatever activity it is. A lot of people get confused between civil and criminal. Oftentimes people see lawsuits on TV and stuff. They see a lot of criminal matters dealing with crimes and murders or whatnot. But civil law is a major portion of our legal system. It's actually way bigger than criminal. Criminal is very small. Civil consists of any suits that deals with parties, whether individuals or companies. And the remedies I just touched on. And the difference, a big difference between the two, is the burden of proof. In a civil law, you have a preponderance of the evidence, which is more likely than not. So the standard is much lower to prove your case, actually. And I'll talk about that later, the difference between a case that actually came out where the person was guilty in a civil law matter, but was actually not guilty in a criminal law matter. It's a very famous case, but I'll talk about that later. And the other category is criminal. Criminal is actually a very small portion. It really deals with just crimes, and they are also broken down into two sets of crimes. Not crimes, but fractions. The first one is the state. When you commit a crime in a state where the state is the one that's prosecuting you. And there's a prosecutor. A prosecutor is really just a lawyer for the government. That's what a prosecutor really is. And then you have a federal crime, which is either interstate or on federal property, or sometimes dealing with a crime that's inherently multi-state, like crossing the border illegally. So that's really the basis of the criminal section. However, with criminal, there is a different standard of proof. The government themselves are the ones having to prove whatever they're alleging. And they have the burden, and their burden is beyond a reasonable doubt. People always ask, what does that mean? It's actually subjective in a way. What is beyond a reasonable doubt to you? Do you have any doubts that this person is guilty based on the evidence provided? Oftentimes, that's left to the jury to decide what is beyond a reasonable doubt. But I'll go into that further later on in a different topic. But that's kind of the legal standard that is the legal standard for criminal matters. Whereas civil, like I mentioned, preponderance of evidence, more likely than not. A very famous case dealing with O.J. Simpson. He was acquitted, as I'm sure most of you know, of murder. And the evidence provided created some doubt in the jurors, who were listening to the evidence. And was it beyond a reasonable doubt for them that some of them didn't feel that way? And therefore, ultimately, he was acquitted. However, the family of the victim sued him in a civil court where the evidence is more likely than not that he committed the crime, and he lost. And however, like I mentioned before, in a civil matter, the family was only able to get money. They were not able to incarcerate him. And that was the big legal distinction between the two. It really comes down to the burden of proof and the type of standard that we have. Another major distinction I forgot is that with criminal, you're looking at either incarceration or some kind of punishment levied by the government, probation and stuff like that. Whereas civil, that's not available. It's like just strict performance, monetary, or injunction. Typically, those major three are the ones you can get in a civil court. So if anyone ever asks you in the future, let's say, hey, this guy was supposed to fix my roof and they started to and they stopped and they just took my money, can I call the cops? typically cops will be like, look, this is a breach of contract, a contract dispute. You guys had a agreement between the parties for services, and one of the parties did not follow through. However, it doesn't rise to the level of criminal conduct, and that's where usually the officers will usually push you and direct you to suing the person in a civil court. So in the future, I mean, I've had this question so many times about, I should have called the cops. I'm like, there's just some things that cops are not going to handle, and they don't have jurisdiction over. So if you guys have any further questions about this topic, feel free to leave a comment below, or also like this video if you believe it's informative and helpful in any way. Thank you very much, and I will be back in the future with future content. Thank you very much.